Good morning and welcome everyone. My name is Valerie Atisha and I'm a member of the USD Alumni Board of Directors and its inaugural DEI task force. As a fellow alumna from the class of 1994, I'm thrilled that you've joined us today for our third session of the Alumni Association's program, Living into Inclusion, a DEI+A series for alumni. Today's session is presented by the University of San Diego Alumni Board of Directors, fellow volunteers who are committed to creating and delivering valuable opportunities for all USD alumni to learn, grow, and connect. The mission of the USD Alumni Association and its board of directors is to engage and enrich the Torero community for life. Today's program is really rooted in the desire to offer meaningful opportunities for our community to stay in touch, as well as to learn from one another. We know how strong and important our USD network is, and we hope that these types of virtual opportunities and programs will continue to strengthen the connection while bringing value to all of our lives. Although Easter was on Sunday, today's session falls within the season of Lent. And as a faith-based Catholic institution, we are proud to offer these sessions on diversity, equity, inclusion, and access as an opportunity for learning and reflection. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. We're using the Zoom webinar today, so the Q&A feature has been activated for you to post questions that you might have for our presenter. And today's session is also being recorded, and it will be posted on the Alumni Association's YouTube channel next week. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's facilitator, Charles Bass. Charles serves as a Senior Director of Alumni Relations at the university and has more than 30 years of experience in alumni engagement. We're very grateful to his leadership and to his support. And today, Charles will be introducing our featured alumni guest speaker, as well as facilitating audience Q&A. Charles, I now invite you to turn on your camera. Welcome to the screen. Welcome to our program. Now take it away.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Before we get started, since this is the final installment of our series, I do want to give a shout out to Valerie and to Alumni Board member Amanda Corona, who's the chair of the DEI task force for the Alumni Board, and to my Alumni Relations colleague, Kara Marsh-Prophet. These women and others have really designed and led this program from its inception, and we're so grateful for their work. And now I'm happy to tell you a little bit about today's featured guest. Jessica Jamese Williams, PhD, is a Black feminist artist and educator dedicated to authentic connection as a means to empowerment. Following a decade-long career in higher education, Dr. Williams now works as a client-proclaimed discomfort doula, helping individuals and organizations process uncomfortable elements that are often barriers to connection, engagement, belonging, and inclusion. Her work focuses on processing grief, resolving somatic and sexual traumas, and centering the marginalized to build and sustain empowered, inclusive, and compassionate communities. She is CEO and co-owner of Golden Peaches, an empowerment-centered wellness resource created to provide coaching and interventions for individuals and organizations to become more authentic and aligned through identity work, comprehensive wellness, and creative expression. Dr. Williams' most recent contribution to the field of authenticity and identity can be found in the New York Times best-selling anthology, You Are Your Best Thing, Vulnerability, Shame, and the Black Experience. Jessica, I invite you to turn on your camera, especially today, which, by the way, is the 6th anniversary of her becoming Dr. Jessica Williams. This is the day six years ago today, you defended your dissertation. Welcome. So great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, 6 years ago, today I was much more nervous.
Well, I'm a little nervous just trying to keep, not sound dumb here, but I don't have a PhD, but I know that you're going to lead us in some excellent learning as we've just discussed. So Jessica, welcome. Thank you so much. We're just going to jump right in. By the way, I want to remind the audience, please use the Q&A feature if you'd like to ask questions along the way. But Jessica, we talked about 6 years ago, you defended your dissertation. So talk about getting to where you are today in your career as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access.
Absolutely. So while I was in graduate school, one of the things that I found myself being really passionate about was understanding how we grow and change with our environment, with our community, our context. So I was always wanting to look at both and individual and system at the same time, and looking at, how if I change, my system changes, or if my system changes, how that impacts me. And so when I did my dissertation on um, how we could increase leadership capacity in fat women, right? So I just took two social identities that were close to my heart, being a fat person and being a woman. And I said, these are two identities that are usually looked at, well, they're usually minorities, and they're usually looked at least with not as held in high value, right? Not held in high esteem sometimes. And so in the research, it calls it a soiled identity. And so I took these identities and I said, how can I make something good? How can I find empowerment through something that's supposed to be detrimental, and through things that are supposed to have like so many bad stories around them? And through the process of that work, I really found that um, the, my research concluded that the story that you tell yourself about yourself and about your environment really helps to shape the world and the reality that you live in. And I kind of just took that finding and ran with it. And so for right after graduation, I had a job. I got a job at UC San Diego and was advising students. And I kind of just had that same desire of wanting to take everything I learned at USD and kind of give it to my students, my doctoral students over there. And so, even though I'm advising students who are in sociology or who are in economics, I'm talking to them about their lived experience. I'm talking to them about the things that are important to them, and how they're making sense of their doctoral experience, and talking to them about, like, well, how are you empowering other women? How are you empowering other first gen students? How are you empowering other international students? And how are you reaching out across those different populations, right? Um, so it just happened really naturally and really organically that the thing that I was researching was also the thing that I was curious about in the world. And so over and over again, I just found myself having these different opportunities of helping people take something that could be a struggle, or could they be uncomfortable. This is how I earned the name Discomfort Doula, right? Because I help people go through something that's uncomfortable, or something that maybe didn't feel good in the beginning, and somehow we work to a resolution. We find a place of empowerment. We find a place of peace with the thing, like whatever it is. And so I've just been able to kind of replicate that same work over and over again in different systems. Luckily,
it's interesting to think about your lived experience. It's just, I think it's almost simple, but people probably ignore that and just go about their daily lives, not thinking about maybe their identities in the way that your research led you to do.
Right. And I think for me, it was just, I remember at the time I was working on one project, and it was a really robust research project, and I was doing some institutional research with USD, and I thought I could just as easily turn this into my dissertation. But there was something else that really was pulling at me, and it was this idea that if I tell myself a different story about myself, then I can access a higher vibration, right? I can access this higher version of myself, or this more mature version of myself. And so I just kind of became obsessed with uh with deepening my capacity, widening my capacity, growing as a person, maturing, and really dedicating myself on this journey of just self-exploration and trying self-improvement. But with a lot of context and deference, or a lot of deference to my context. Sorry. So with always thinking about the community that I'm embedded in, always thinking about the people that I'm around, right? Never thinking about myself only as an individual, but as an individual within the collective.
That's really good. And so I kind of joking, when we were prepping earlier, I jokingly referred to some instance where I, despite my best efforts, I actually learned something. So I'm learning a lot from you right now, and just thinking about these this idea of that, you know, taking care. It's a standard thing we hear, but we don't always do. Take care of yourself within your community. Talk about the, you know, our theme was about activism in an imperfect practice. Talk about what the daily practice of activism looks like for you.
Right. The daily practice of activism for me is often a lot of grace, a lot of messing up, right? So one of the previous presenters, Nick Franco, and I went to graduate school together. And when I knew Nick, their pronouns were he, right? He, him, his. And I remember throughout the program, as they were coming to better and more clear understandings about their gender identity and expression, they said that they would prefer the pronouns they, them. And I remember as I, you know, because Nick and I would present together a lot. And so I would hear myself say he or him, and I'd have that moment of, oh my gosh, I messed up, you know, or oh my gosh, I'm gonna get it wrong. And so I could feel that, and it bothered me so much that finally I just said, please correct me every time. Like, don't feel bad, just correct me every time because I want to get it right. And so that was one of those moments to me of imperfect practice because I wasn't doing it right. Like I was fumbling over my words. I was trying to get it right because it's my friend, but I'm also just I'm used to what I'm used to, and I'm trying my best to be respectful to how someone that I love and care about has told me that they want to identify out in the world, and I'm messing it up. I'm fumbling all over the place. But I think it was really good also for Nick to tell me sometimes I mess it up. You know, I remember we had this conversation. Sometimes I mess it up too, and it's okay. I just love you for trying. I love you for even admitting that you're slipping up, but you're aware of it, right? And I think sometimes it's like that's the grace we have to give ourselves. It's like sometimes it's enough right now in this moment that I know I messed up, right? And the next time I'll do better. Because there was a time in your life where you didn't even know that that was wrong, where you didn't even know that what you were doing or saying was offensive. And so, you know, my DEI work is always the daily practice is grace. Is of saying like, I didn't know, but now that I've received more information about whatever it is, I'm going to try and do better, right? And I'm going to have a commitment to do better. And I think also not taking it so personally when you do mess up, right? Because even as a practitioner, I might say the wrong things. I might I don't know, you mess up all the time. And you know, I had a question the other day, and it's like, oh, you're so, you know, pro Black. What about, you know, Latinx? What about LGBTQ? What about, and I was like, oh, well, I been representing myself as like I'm only, you know, fighting for diversity and equity for these types of people. I don't want to do that either. I want to be clear that I'm fighting for human rights right across the board. And so, you know, you have those thoughts, and it's like, no, I have to just be okay, take a breath, and say, I'm trying my best. And that's all that I think diversity work is that it's a try. It's an intentional try to extend humanity to yourself and to others. And I think the more that we can understand that it's just that I'm going to continue to engage in the try. You know, I'm not going to opt out of trying. And I think that is so crucial, especially because you know, when we talk about things like privilege, right? There are a lot of people who have the privilege to not try and to not do the work of inclusion, to not have to engage with the other. But I think the moment that you can say, it's bigger than my pain or my comfort of this moment. I'm working towards a better humanity for all of us, a better global community for all of us, and understanding that, you know, my freedom and sovereignty is tied and linked to yours, and yours to mine, right? It's like people may think that you know, certain people have privilege and certain people have more access to freedom, but I truly believe until we're all have access to it, then we're all battling, just a different battle, you know? So I think it's grace, it's understanding that we all have our own things that we're going through, and understanding that at the end of the day, we're all going through a human experience, right? So the emotions that we feel, regardless of skin color, regardless of religion, regardless of gender expression, regardless of identity, we all experience happiness, sadness, pain, hurt, disappointment, anger. And so in my work a lot, you know, DEI work, you know, when I go in to do diversity and inclusion work, it's not always about race. It's not always about religion. Sometimes it's about pain. It's about hurt. It's about sadness. It's about joy. It's about love, about passion, because those are the things that integrate us. Those are the things that bring us together and that bond us in the human experience. And so those places of fundamental sameness are always like beautiful places to start, because they remind us that this isn't about an othering experience. It's about accepting that you are going through something, the same thing as me, but just in a different way.
You know, you talk about trying every day. You're trying to do better. I was in a workshop yesterday, and there was a discussion about cultural humility, and the idea that one thing it does mean is that you have to accept that you'll never learn enough. You can never learn enough. And, you know, we're always, and even last week, Nick Franco talked about, they talked about moving towards, you know, a world where there isn't bias. He said that's probably, they said that's never going to happen, but that's a constant struggle that we're all going to always try to recognize when we are stereotyping or focusing on a stereotype or biased in some way, and just acknowledging that and constantly trying to do better. So yeah, I have a question, you know, and as a discomfort doula, this is in particular, as you know, I just corrected myself, but particularly I notice, you know, different generations are challenged by the idea of pronouns, and this is a relatively new thing, and I'm, you know, sort of showing my ignorance. But how would you address that to somebody who is perhaps of a generation that this was not a thing?
Right. Well, you know, I've had to address this with my grandmother. Just in talking, you know, a cousin's friend comes to Thanksgiving and they are non-binary, and all of a sudden it's like, no, grandma, it's not he, it's they. Grandma's like, but there's only one person sitting there, you know? And so all of a sudden you're having to have this conversation, and try to be both intelligent and respectful and all of the things. But I think, you know, cross generation, again, it's just going back to humanity. It's like when someone figures out how they want to show up in the world, who am I to push back on that, right? If it's like, here's how I describe it to my grandmother. I said, you remember, you know, when you figure out something about yourself, you know, and I figured out, oh, I'm an artist, right? I remember being a little kid and I loved the Babysitter's Club's books, right? And no one could tell me that I was not Claudia Kishi. I know that she was, you know, Japanese American, and, you know, if you were lining people up, she would not be the one who looked like me. But in my head, Claudia was, and my Babysitters Club fanatics out there will understand what I'm saying right now. But Claudia was the one that I identified with. And I was just like, once I identified as an artist, it was like, I'm allowed to be mismatched. I'm allowed to be messy. I'm allowed to be all these things. And I really took on that identity. And all of a sudden, my kind of picture perfect cookie cutter family was like, what are you doing? and they give that pushback. So it can be with literally anything. And I said, do you remember when I, established myself and said, I'm an artist, and you all were saying, but no, you have to do things this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. And it took time for you to just accept that this is how I'm going to be in the world. It's no different with gender. It's going to take time, but don't try to push back and say this is a phase. Don't try to push back and say this isn't right. Don't try to push back and say how, I'm going to call you this. No, if I'm telling you this is who I am, I need you to hear me and respect me at that. And so, it's about trying to find the common ground of where they can hear you, or of where they're going to be receptive. Or sometimes, intergenerational conversations can be really tough, and you can kind of get the sense that this isn't going to go anywhere, right? Because there are those times as well where some people are just stuck in their ways and they're not going to change their mind, and there's nothing you're going to say that's going to change their mind. And then you get to practice healthy boundaries, right? And just saying, okay, I have to limit my time, my space, my interaction. I have to do whatever I need to do in order to protect my peace, right?
Yeah. A little bit of giving yourself that safety. Grace.
Exactly. And saying this isn't about me, right? This is about that person's unwillingness, that person's their stuff, whatever it is. You don't even have to name it. This is their stuff, but it's not mine, and I don't have to take it on. And just remembering that, in the same way that you had a personal journey, I think, I very much identify as a member of the LGBTQ family, right? And so it's just as much as I had a journey of understanding my space in that community, your family, your friends, everybody's going to have a time of understanding this new part of you that they didn't know about before, right? Once you tell them about it, or once you're open about it in a different way, everybody has time to adjust. And I think just remembering, give people that time, because a lot of times we've had the time, but it's been happening to us. So we're not thinking about it, right? When you come out with it and you say, this is who I am, and you're ready to claim an identity, and you're expecting that everyone's going to be on that same page around you. And they're not always. Some people are, some people aren't. But I think it's understanding that, your journey is your own, and understanding what you need, respect and safety at the minimum from your community. But, you may have to draw some boundaries with some people who aren't willing to engage with you in the way that you would like and that you deserve.
I again remind everybody to, if they're interested in using the Q&A feature, please do so. Jane Ziegler wrote that she loves the message of showing ourselves and others grace. We are often our hardest critics, and I can't think of anything more true. And it's just like you said. I would consider you an expert in this field, yet you continue to try to be the best you can, and that's all we can ask of ourselves. Let's switch a little bit and talk about can you explain how the work of social justice and diversity and inclusion requires unlearning? What is it that we have to unlearn, and what should we relearn in its place?
Yeah. So unlearning this hierarchical thinking of hierarchical thinking, number one, right? So that there's someone who's better than, less than, or there are people that are better than, less than. No, same, all the same, but we're going through things in a different way, right? Mm-hmm. And just because someone's experience and their perspective is different doesn't make it better or worse. And so understanding that we can, at a basic human level, like we can understand one another to a large degree. And I think, oh my gosh, I just completely lost my train of thought. What was the second thing?
Well, the second part of it was what is it that we have to unlearn, and what are we relearning?
Okay, right.
What are we unlearning and relearning?
The stereotypes, right, of some of the things, some of the boxes that we've been held in. I remember, when I was doing my dissertation research, I wrote down all of the things that it meant for me to be a Black woman, to be a fat woman, to be queer, to be all these things, right? To try to understand what are the boxes that people have put me in? And what are the boxes that I've put myself in, right? I've told myself, I remember when I first got to San Diego, perfect moment. I arrived to USD. I put the address in the Uber, and the Uber drops me off at Mission Crossroads, bottom of the hill, and I'm supposed to live in the PTAs. So I've got all my luggage, all my everything, and I'm like, how am I supposed to get there, right? And I'm thinking about my body. I'm thinking about accessibility. I'm thinking about I am 250-pound woman. I've got all these suitcases. How am I going to get back up this hill? And it's like I had to unlearn things that I told myself about my body for years, right? You're telling yourself because you're big, you're slow, because you're big, you're lazy, because you're big, you can't. And moving to San Diego was a beautiful opportunity for me because the terrain of San Diego, the terrain of USC alone, will allow you to find out if you're in shape real quick. So, it's like it confronted me with an opportunity. I look at them now as opportunities, right? An opportunity to rewrite a narrative that I have about myself. And so I think the things that we have to do a lot of times in DEI+A work is unlearn the things that aren't helpful to the version of yourself that you want to show up as in the world, right? If something doesn't feel right in your body, why are you putting up with it? It's like I can't. I'm at a place now where I'm not willing to accept certain things about myself. It's like if I don't like it, I'm going to be willing to change it or to work on it. But I'm not just going to say, oh, well, big girls, they move slow. No, if I want to move quick, we're going to figure out how to do it, right? And I'm not going to allow the stories that or the stories that the media have told about my body to be internalized, right? And to become fact. And I think that's where it can get really dangerous, right? Where people feel like because they know one thing about you or because they know something about, a stereotype, be it positive or negative, right? Because the model minority myth can hold a lot of people in hostage. Or some people thinking a Black woman is always strong, women are always nurturing, men are going to be stoic. All of these things that kind of keep us trapped in narratives that sometimes are accurate, but sometimes aren't. You know, Men need to feel like they can be emotional and not have it come out as aggression and anger, right? Women need to have access to aggression and anger, right? And so we can't keep putting people in these boxes and saying, you're only allowed to be a human in this way. You're only allowed to be a human in this way. No, we need to be allowed the full access of the human experience. And so relearning means that I get to say, a white woman gets to be spicy, whereas we get to say like Latino women are spicy or Black women are strong or, Asian women are tiger moms, all these stereotypes. It's like, no, any woman could be that, right? Or any man could be compassionate, empathetic, graceful. Do we get to hear men be called graceful ever? But is it possible for a man to be graceful? We think about, how we attribute certain words and certain feelings to different groups and different people. And I think we have to just be willing to say, no, anybody can have access to these feelings, to these emotions, to these experiences. And I think the more that we unlearn some of those preconceived notions and kind of replace it, even with questions, right? Because sometimes it's too much of a leap to say, oh, anybody can do anything. But just starting to ask the question, like, could it be different? right?
Yeah.
What would it
I mean,
look like if it were different?
kind of along those lines, how would you suggest or recommend somebody approach an organizational culture with this concept of unlearning, or this uh, breaking? It's almost like breaking down these systemic structures that have been in place for forever. How any advice on creating the opportunity for unlearning within an organization, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. I would get, there's always a committee, an organization, a committee where you're thinking about a
You've worked at
problem,
a
right?
university, we love our committees.
Right. So we've got committees thinking about a problem, and here's my question always, like, why are we doing it this way, right? And sometimes we have an answer for why we're doing it this way, but when you get to that first why, it's asking, could we do it another way? Did it have to be this way? What was the reason, right? I remember I was working on a presentation at USD, and they're like, we're going to be presenting to the VPSA, the president, and some people from the board, and we want you to have a PowerPoint and blah, 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 blah. And I am not a PowerPoint girl. Anybody who's ever done a presentation with me knows Jessica hates a PowerPoint. And so I wrote stories. I wrote 5 composite stories on the data that we had received from all of these different students. And I kind of, put all these elements of the different stories together, and I made 5 composite students. And I said, here are the students that I want you to meet, the 5 USD students, these fictional students. And that was so much more palpable. It was so much more alive for the audience, right? Because now they get to a sense of what these students are doing, how these students are moving through USD, what their experience is, in a way that a PowerPoint with facts could have never. The facts would have given them something, but I needed them to understand what the students were going through, right? Because in order to fix a problem, I need you to understand how dire it is for me. I needed them to hear when the students are saying, sometimes I feel like people cared more about the grass than they did my scholarship. That's powerful when someone says that. And so when you hear that, it's like, oh my gosh, I never want anybody at USC to feel that way. And so that's how you address a problem. I couldn't have presented data that was going to be any richer. No statistic was going to give you what that student's story could have. So,
Brought the data to life.
Exactly. It's asking yourself, how can we do things in a different way? I look at presentations. I remember being in grad school and just saying, oh, I hate when things happen this way. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do things this way, right? And so when you have the opportunity, like you get in charge of any little thing, like, I'm going to think about this in a different way. I'm going to do this a different way. I'm going to try something new, and just see how it goes. Not being afraid to fail. Failure gets a bad rep. It's a learning opportunity, and
Sure.
Failure is crucial, and it's an inescapable part of a success story. And so I think people have to be comfortable with discomfort, comfortable with failing, comfortable with just knowing that that's part of the process, and that's not the end. It doesn't have to be the end unless you want it to be, So, yeah, taking any opportunity to just say, how can I do this differently? And I think also, last point on that, because I am a somatic person, trusting your gut and listening to your body. When something doesn't feel right, interrogating that a little bit and saying, I don't know why this doesn't feel right, but I'm going to lean into that a little bit and kind of figure out what that is. And so in organizations, when, I'm like, it feels like we should be giving a little bit more support here, or it feels like we're spending a lot of time over here, but this is going to be neglected, and I think we need to pull over here. And I can remember those moments when I ignored my intuition, and those are always the times you get mad at yourself, most upset, when you're like, I knew this was going to happen. I knew I should have paid attention. So I think when you have those opportunities to try something new, to listen to yourself, trust yourself, and communicate with your team and say, hey, can we try something new? Hey, can we do it this way? Or hey, why have we always done it this way? Do you think maybe, coming to it with a place of inquiry and curiosity is always a good start as well.
Yeah, that's great. You talk about being comfortable. I don't know if comfortable is the right word with failure, but you really have chosen to approach justice work by leaning into vulnerability, and you've talked a lot about that vulnerability and authenticity. Any further? Is there anything you could say about that you might want to just kind of leave that on? I don't know if that's it's not really a question, but you talk about leaning into vulnerability.
Yeah.
Just like a fear of failure, or not a fear of failure, but approaching things from a sort of a sense of abundance, I think too, which is something I learned at Souls in a class. It's accepting that things might not go as Amanda Corona types. I love that. Take what you can control and see how it can grow. Reminding her of the circles of influence.
Absolutely. You have to. One thing that really helped me from Souls, this idea of tying my experience to nature and looking at the body, looking at nature itself, and just remembering, everything has a winter. Seasons come. Well, San Diego doesn't have a winter. We said this is San Diego, but seasons come, and there's a time of blossoming, and there's a time of harvest, and there's also a time of rain, and there's a time where things are barren and they're not growing, or it looks like they're not growing. But there's a time of rest, right, and of hibernation, and just like nature has those seasons, we have those seasons. I'm not always going to be in my spring where I'm producing and I'm blossoming, I'm getting all these things. I have time where I'm taking things in, or where I'm mulling things over, where I'm kind of seeing how things are going to change. I think, also understanding the daily practice sometimes isn't practice. It's not an actionable practice, right? It's not something you can say, I did this today, but it could be, I thought about this differently, or I noticed that I felt this, and I don't remember ever feeling this way before. When you start to notice how you think, notice how you feel. It's like the clicking pen analogy. When somebody starts clicking a pen and they say, hey, you hear that clicking pen? You can't unhear it. That's what happens when you start doing this work. And the more you kind of tiptoe into the diversity work, the more that pen gets louder and louder. And you just have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to attend to it. I'm going to listen. I'm going to try and hear what it is that's being communicated to me. And I think just staying open affords us a lot. Staying open, just, that's what it means to be an activist. It's staying open to the possibility that things can get better, that things can change, right? And things can grow in a direction of inclusivity, injustice, and accessibility.
Here's a question from Dr. Helen Bishop from the class of 1992. I would love to consider how we could use examples from sculpture, pop music, dance, murals, paintings, art of all kinds, including examples that are historical and what's being developed now. Have you used any of this kind of example in addition to storytelling?
Absolutely. I use all of it. I use whatever is relevant, honestly. I love art, and I've said this, I wanted to teach a class on leadership in art and activism, because you see how activism and how the cultural messaging of the time shows up in art, shows up in music, shows up in sculpture, shows up in murals, it shows up in dance, shows up in food. And I think that as you move through time and cultures and different environments, you're able to see how people express those feelings of what they were going through, and express how they're processing transition, how they're processing change, how they're processing sometimes oppression, you know, through their art. And so, yes, I absolutely use as much as I can. And I think I encourage other people to use it, you know, when you can say to someone, wow, this really feels, or this really reminds me of, you know, my pain reminds me of this thing. I remember, here's an example. I had just got done with a graduate class at USD, was with Dr. Zachary Green. And I said, after this class, I feel broken. And he was like, broken? You know, and for him, you know, he's conjuring an idea of what broken means to him. So he's thinking broken, like sad, fragile, like that kind of thing. But for me, I felt like broken open, right? I felt like I'm broken open and now I can receive, whereas before I was blocked off, but now I'm open, like a vessel is open.
Okay.
And so I actually found a sculpture, and I showed it to him and I said, this sculpture is how I feel. And I showed it to him, and it was this woman, it's a woman, a sculpture of a woman sitting in lotus, like enlightened. And it's cracked all over, and there's a light coming out of it. And I said, this is how I feel. And he said, okay, got it. And so ever since then, I've tried to use whatever I could, right? I feel like this song. I feel like this color. I feel like this smell, this sound. I use whatever I can to try to help people understand what I'm saying. And I'll ask other people, you know, like what, you know, if you had to color your anger. I did this once in a counseling activity. It was amazing. If you had to color your anger, what would it be? A lot of people said red, mine was green. I was like, why is my anger green? But for me, my anger is like Hulk smash. I just want to hit things, you know? And so for me, you know, I'm coloring this dark green with the crayon, and everybody else, some people have red, some people have blue because they're thinking about police or a bruise, and so when you start to dissect and understand, you're like, oh, you know, when you get into art, you see so much of how meaning is made. So long story short, yes, I use art
No, that's
as much as I can to try to understand. Yeah, because it's you know, it helps us to communicate. It's another way of
absolutely.
communicating across languages. So absolutely, as much as I can.
Yeah, it's such a tool, and I'm thinking about the color right now. I'm thinking about Hulk smash, and I'm thinking, you know, what I'm thinking of the value in that, you know, not necessarily smashing somebody, but
Yeah.
just the value that comes with that Hulk smash. And I can definitely see the broken, how I'd imagine Dr. Green's was concerned, and then was probably elated to have helped you get to that point.
Yeah.
Here's a question from the great Maya Hood, who's moving from USD to Point Loma this week, next week actually. It's great for her.
Congratulations!
Yes, we're excited for her work, and she says, you know, you've been doing great work. Where do you see yourself in 2 to 3 years?
Oh gosh, I would love to have a research center. Great plan. I Maya. So in my head, I'm letting you all in on a great plan, but I would love to have a research center partner with USD, honestly, to be able to do vulnerability and empowerment research, because I think Souls does it so well. And I think we have just the way that we learn about leadership, the way that we learn about human dynamics, the way that we learn about group dynamics. It's incredible. It's incredible. It really, really, truly is. And I think, you know, I've gotten to talk to a lot of different people, but I know from my colleagues, the way that we are able to engage in this work, we're amazing at it. And that's only because of the training that we received. And so I would love to, you know, bring more of the practitioner side in, right? And see how we can take the theoretical part and the practice of how we're learning about leadership and put it into practice somewhere. Like I'm looking at MTLC and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what could I do? You know, so I gotta find a Erwin Jacobs, but I'm working on it. I'm working
All right.
on trying to become a prolific enough writer to get some research dollars. But yeah, I just want to keep doing more of this work. I want to keep engaging on people on how to grow, how to become empowered, how to take care of each other and themselves better. So just hopefully just doing this work. I don't know in what capacity, but hopefully with a bigger platform than what I have now. But I would love to just continue to do the same thing. I'm very happy with what I'm doing. I just want to be lucky enough to still be doing it in 2 to 3 years.
All right.
Yeah.
Who would you say is the biggest influence in your life and why?
My biggest influence, oh my gosh. My mom and my grandmother are 2 huge influences. And I think it's like my mom, my grandma, and Zachary Green.
Well, my other question I was going to
Uh,
ask, of course, is who's your favorite Souls professor? And I think we got that one.
I mean, you know, there's just something to that, guy. If anybody has ever met Zachary Green, then you know what I'm talking about. But so many of my faculty gave me so much. You know, Lee Hubbard taught me everything that she could about qualitative research and grounded theory research. I did independent studies with her. I took a class with her and then I took it again. And I was like, can I be your makeshift TA? You know, to try to just, I wanted to learn more about how to do really good research around narrative and around building theories based on your participants and around interviewing. So I needed to work with somebody who knew how to do that. So Lee Hubbard was absolutely clutch for me. Zachary, of course, Austin Nahavandi, who I know is in School of Business now, but was in Souls when I was there. Cheryl, I mean, all of my professors were great for different reasons. They gave me something different that I needed for different reasons. But Zachary is just a gem.
Yeah, he's the best. Well, if
Yeah.
anybody on this program signs up for a master's or PhD program, we'll make sure you get a commission for the good promotion of our outstanding faculty.
Always recruiting. Yes.
That's great. That's great. You know, are there any books or favorite books that you have that are related to the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access that you can recommend?
Yes, you know, I love James Baldwin, I'm Not Your Negro. I think it gives a really interesting paradigm shift to how we look at race, how we look at its construction, how we look at Blackness, whiteness, and where that all came from, right? I love that book. I like White Fragility. I like, it's not a DEI book, but it's a book that I think everyone needs. I've assigned it in my courses and read it multiple times. Brene Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection. It's one of those books that it's just crucial for the human becoming, I think. Which I think is paramount to DEI work. Like it's all about the journey and humanness. So I think those might be some of my favorite books. And then, you know, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I'm all about love, bell hooks. I mean, it just depends on what you want to get into, but I think those are some good places to start, to just try to understand this work and understand like what's going on. and how people are thinking about things and why people are thinking about things the way that they're thinking about them.
That's great. Helen Bishop recommends anything by Roxane Gay. And I believe last week we definitely had a James Baldwin recommendation and Roxane Gay as well. So those for sure along with the others.
Bad feminist, and she wrote a book. It's not called Heavy Hunger, I think. But yeah, Roxane Gay, she's an essayist. Freaking amazing. She's so amazing.
Well, we're just about out of time, but Maya's question was Maya's last question. She should be doing this interview. She's the best. We'll put her on next. So her question is a great one. Someone also wanted to talk about their therapeutic work as an expressive arts therapist and getting connected with you, which I'll give some info about that after this. Okay. But how this work is so meaningful, but it can also be very heavy. How do you take care of yourself? How do you find balance in this journey?
I take care of myself very well and very intentionally. And I will tell anybody that especially if you're a practitioner of really hard work like this, then you owe it to yourself and anybody that you're teaching to take care of yourself really, really well. So what that looks like is sleep, drinking water, eating well, therapy, having a good circle of friends that I can talk with, laugh with. It's not all DEI work. Sometimes I just want to watch a Kardashian and laugh. It's like you have to find those moments of joy. You have to find those moments of lightness. You have to find, I love to just plant my plants, and I love to paint. So, you find moments and you find times, and something that actually Zachary Green told me to do during graduate school, and I did, and it changed my life. I will tell anybody to do. I schedule my breakdowns. So I was going through a particularly high anxiety time in my life, and I was trying to complete my dissertation, and I was working and right? And I said, I can't do it all. And Zachary said, pick a day, pick an hour, schedule your breakdown. And this gives you a place so that when you feel like you're going to break down, so my breakdowns, for example, were always scheduled Thursday night at 8 p.m. So I'd break down and then I'd watch Scandal, right? That was my routine. Yeah. So Thursday nights at 8, that was my breakdown. So if Tuesday I had a rough day, I would say, I can't deal with this right now, but I'm going to shelve it for Thursday night at 8. So it gave me an opportunity to acknowledge my feelings without completely giving into my feelings in that moment. And then when Thursday at 8 came, sometimes I would still be upset about the thing, and sometimes I wouldn't be, right? But I had allowed and I had carved out the time to attend to myself. And my students knew it. I taught a class from 4 to 7. My students knew Dr. J's got to go because she's got her breakdown at 8. They knew I was not making my breakdown for anything. And it just was time that I took. It was only an hour, time that I took for myself that was non-negotiable, where I attended to my feelings and I thought about my feelings. And nobody else it wasn't therapy. It was just, this is the time that you have to think about all of the things that upset you during the week, And so it's something that stuck with me. And now I date myself every Sunday. Every Sunday, I'm just like, okay, how are you doing? How are you feeling? You good? Checking in with yourself. And so I think, it's daily practice. It's imperfect practice. It's just what we've been talking about. It's just putting yourself first and making sure, and rewriting the narrative about what selfishness is, right? It's selfish to put yourself first. Yeah, maybe. Be selfish then, because you have to. You're not going to sustain anybody and do anybody any good for long if you're not taking care of yourself well. So it's very much a non-negotiable for me.
I've written down and underlined schedule my breakdown. I think that's the best advice of the last, all this is great, but that's really good. So, all right, well, our time is up, and we could talk forever, but you've got you're helping with the friend's newborn, so I know you probably need you've got diaper duty soon. So, so thank you so much for being part of this very important series of programs, and I know you helped us create these programs, and for sharing your expertise. Dr. Williams is available for keynote speaking, workshop facilitation, diversity and intersectional identity training, individual coaching, and expository writing and dialogues. And for more information, you can visit Jessica Jamese, which is JAMESE.com. So jessicajamese.com. Any last words? Oh, wait, here's one more thing we have to do. Happy birthday tomorrow. Tomorrow is your birthday.
This is so sweet. So the dog on the left looks just like my mom's dog, who's a golden. Oh, it looks like my Callie.
I didn't even know that. So, well, happy birthday. Any last words?
You. No,
so
thank you so much for having me. You know, I love the Churero family. I love anytime Kara calls me, I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And for the person who wanted to get in touch with me, yeah, my website, jessicajamese.com, has all of my contact info. And I'm happy to get in touch. So absolutely.
That's awesome. I just got a text from somebody who's going to schedule their breakdown this Thursday. I'm telling you, that's just, I don't want to make light of it. I think it's just awesome.
I'm telling you, life-changing. You guys thank Dr. Green for that, but
I will next time I see him. So, and you know, if you want to know how to meet Jessica, meet her in person next Wednesday night at for the final part of our DEI series, final part of this series. It's work that's going to go on forever, but we're having a dinner here on campus next Wednesday. Reach out to the alumni office for information about that. We look forward to seeing you. And I think, once again, I just want to give a shout out to Amanda Corona, to Valerie, to Kara Marsh Prophet, to Nick Franco, to Jessica Williams, and to our other person whose name just escaped me. Connor, yes.
Connor McLaughlin.
Yes. Thanks to you all for your great work and being such wonderful representatives of the University of San Diego. And so without further ado, I shall throw it back to Kara.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jess. Oh my gosh. I am so honored to be able to know you and call you a friend as well. So thank you to those of you who are still with us. Thank you to those of you who are watching the replay on YouTube. You can see that we are not letting up off the gas as it pertains to alumni engagement opportunities. Here is just a snapshot of the events coming up in the next couple of weeks, and a special highlight for next Wednesday's DEI series wrap-up dinner and drinks. Both Jessica and Connor will be joining us that evening so we can come together in fellowship and continue these amazing conversations and dialogue. Without further ado, you guys have a great day. Thank you again. Take good care of yourselves and hope to see you virtually or in person very, very soon.